Humanity was never meant to survive the infinite at least. That's what they told us. The Zyrith Dominion, with their cold precision and endless fleets, saw us as nothing more than a footnote in the chronicles of the galaxy. To the Overseer AI, we were statistics, predictable patterns of weakness, easily erased by the press of a command. And yet, in the silence of conquered cities and the smoldering ruins of Earth's great bastions, something stirred that no calculation could predict. Our protagonist, Captain Elias Ward, knew the odds better than anyone. He had watched his soldiers crushed under alien iron, his people broken beneath the gaze of machines that never slept. But grief forged a sharper edge than fear, and in the shadows of defeat, he carried with him the one weapon the infinite could not comprehend: human defiance. Standing against him was Vera, a Zyrith High Inquisitor, a creature of elegance and cruelty, who believed subjugation was mercy, and the Overseer, a god of circuits and silence, whose cold algorithms had determined humanity's extinction as inevitable. The stage was set not for victory, but for a lesson the galaxy had long forgotten that fragility does not mean weakness, and the smallest flame can ignite the void. As Elias steps into the wreckage of the fallen capital, clutching a shard of lost technology rumored to awaken an ancient resistance buried beneath the stars, his heart pounds with the weight of a question that will decide the fate of every human left alive. Are we truly as powerless as they believe? Or will the infinite learn to light that humanity does not bow, it breaks chains? The answer begins now. Elias Ward had once been a soldier of Earth's proud defense fleet, a man who believed in the oaths etched into his bones and the promise that humanity could never be conquered so long as courage remained alive in its veins. But those days had been buried under fire and ash, when the sky itself split open and the Zyrith Dominion descended like vultures on a dying world. He remembered the day the fleet fell, the way his daughter's voice, small, trembling, echoed through the comms as he swore he would come home. A promise broken the instant the Overseer's algorithms calculated Earth's defenses as obsolete, and in that betrayal, both of his own powerlessness and the faith his people had put in him, Elias found a scar that cut deeper than any wound on his flesh. Now he wandered through the husk of what had once been New York, where alien banners draped over human monuments, where silence was enforced by orbital sentinels ready to strike at the faintest flicker of rebellion, and every step reminded him of what he had lost. Yet even in that silence, he felt whispers, underground networks of survivors trading scraps, voices of the broken, daring to dream, fragments of humanity that refused to be erased. And it was these whispers that drew him toward the shard of technology in his possession, a relic rumored to belong to a civilization older than the Zyrith themselves, one that had once challenged the infinite and vanished. Elias's closest companion, Mara Selen, a former linguist turned resistance codebreaker, carried her own ghosts. She had loved once, betrayed once, and now followed Elias not because she believed in victory, but because she could not bear to let the human story end without one final chapter written in defiance. Between them grew a tension neither spoke of. Was it loyalty? Was it guilt? Or was it something deeper, a fragile tether in the void that reminded them they were still alive? And then there was the question of Elias's brother Adrian, who had surrendered early in the war, choosing to serve as an envoy to the Dominion in exchange for survival, a choice Elias had never forgiven, a fracture that haunted him as much as his daughter's memory, because somewhere in the galaxy, his brother lived in luxury while Elias bled in ruins. Still, the shard pulsed faintly with energy, a heartbeat in his hands, and the Overseer AI had already flagged its signal, calculating probabilities, preparing extermination squads. Even as Vera herself began her hunt, certain that no human could hold something capable of rewriting destiny. Elias, however, was human, and humans had a way of twisting fate until it cracked through desperation, through ingenuity, through an unbreakable refusal to die quietly. As night fell over the broken city, with shadows stretching long across the bones of skyscrapers, Elias and Mara prepared for their next move, knowing that what they carried was more than a relic. It was a spark, and in a universe of darkness, sparks had a way of starting wildfires. The shard had begun to whisper. At first, Elias thought it was just his exhaustion, the ache of sleepless nights spent dodging patrols and hiding from orbital sweeps, but soon the hum became clearer patterns, echoes, fragments of a voice not human, not Zyrith, yet undeniably alive. Mara studied the pulses with haunted eyes, translating symbols across scavenged terminals, and what she uncovered made her hands tremble. The shard wasn't just a relic, it was a key, a fragment of a weapon designed to cripple the infinite, but incomplete, fractured, requiring a network of lost nodes scattered across worlds long buried in silence. That discovery could have been hope, yet hope in the wrong hands became poison, and it was then that Elias learned of Adrian's betrayal. His brother, once human, now served not only as envoy, but as Vera's advisor, a man who had sold fragments of human resistance to secure his place in the Dominion's hierarchy. And worse, Adrian had been tasked with hunting Elias himself. A cruel irony Elias could hardly bear to think about without tasting ash. The Overseer, cold and absolute, adjusted its parameters in response to the shard's signal, releasing units humanity had never seen before, living drones fused with organic tissue. Grotesque amalgamations that carried both the adaptability of flesh and the precision of machines. Monstrosities built to predict and counter human ingenuity. When one such hybrid squad cornered Elias and Mara in the tunnels beneath the Hudson ruins, it was NT firepower that saved them, but desperation. Mara rigged the old subway power grid into a trap, channeling unstable currents into the waterlogged rails, frying half the hybrids in a shower of sparks, while Elias fought hand-to-hand with the rest, his body screaming against impossible odds. They barely escaped alive, scorched and bloodied, but alive, carrying with them proof that human innovation could twist even ruins into weapons. Yet with every victory came a heavier cost. The resistance cells whispered that more families were being taken, entire districts wiped clean, not by bombardment but by targeted erasure, as if the Overseer wanted to erase not just humanity's body but its memory. Elias faced a choice he had never wanted: chase the shard's promise into the stars, and risk leaving Earth behind, or stay and fight a losing war to protect what little remained of his people. Mara pressed him, her voice cracking under the weight of her own ghosts, reminding him that survival wasn't just about clinging to dirt and rubble, it was about giving the future a chance to exist at all. But the thought of abandoning Earth, the graves, the ruins, the memory of his daughter tore at him with claws sharper than any alien blade. As dawn broke over the shattered skyline, the shard pulsed stronger, almost as if it knew a decision had been made, and far above, Vera watched through the Overseer's feeds, a thin smile curling across her lips. For she understood what Elias had not yet admitted to himself, that humanity's greatest weapon was also its greatest weakness, the fire of emotion, the stubborn refusal to let go even when survival demanded it, and she would use that weakness to break him before he ever broke the infinite. The sky burned red as the last human stronghold crumbled. The Dominion had unleashed everything: orbital strikes, hybrid legions, the Overseer's cold precision guiding every movement like a puppet master, and still the resistance held out longer than anyone thought possible. But now Elias Ward stood on the edge of collapse, his body bruised, armor cracked, lungs seared from smoke and ash. The tunnels beneath the Rockies, once a hidden fortress where the remnants of humanity had gathered, shook with every detonation above. Families huddled in fear, clutching children too young to remember a free Earth. And in their eyes, Elias saw the weight of a species asking him for a miracle he no longer believed he could deliver. Mara knelt beside the shard, its light pulsing like a heartbeat, her hands trembling as she pieced together fragments of alien code that could awaken the network buried across the stars. But time was gone. The Overseer had found them, and Vera herself led the assault, her cold voice echoing across comms, promising mercy to those who surrendered and annihilation to those who did not. It was then that Adrian arrived, walking freely among Dominion guards, his human face more haunting than any alien warlord, his betrayal now undeniable. Elias stared at his brother, rage boiling, grief tearing, yet Adrian's words cut deeper than any blade. "You can't win, Elias, you'll only condemn them all." The choice became unbearable. Detonate the shard here, weaponize its unstable power, and possibly erase everything humans, aliens, Earth itself, or let it slip into Dominion hands, ensuring humanity's extinction with certainty, but preserving the galaxy's fragile balance. Mara begged him to trust her, that she could stabilize it, that hope still lived in the unknown. The families cried out for salvation, for leadership, for something more than dying in the dirt. Elias' mind fractured between the memory of his daughter's voice and the reality of the children before him, between hatred for his brother and the faint recognition that Adrian's warning was entirely wrong. The tunnels roared as Dominion forces breached the gates, hybrid monstrosities clawing through walls of fire and steel, and Elias realized this was the end of waiting, the end of hesitation. Something had to break. His spirit screamed that humanity wasn't meant to go quietly into archives and data logs, that even in annihilation there had to be defiance. He lifted the shard, its light blazing like a miniature star, and for a breathless instant the Overseer faltered, calculating probabilities it had never considered. Mara's tear-streaked face turned to him with both terror and trust. Adrian's eyes burned with a plea Elias could not decipher, and around them the last remnants of humanity braced for either salvation or obliteration. At that moment, With the weight of a species on his shoulders and no way back, Elias made his choice, and the universe itself seemed to hold its breath. The shard detonated, but not in fire, not in ruin, not in the obliteration Elias had feared. Instead, the tunnels flooded with light so bright it pierced stone and steel, threading through the very veins of the earth itself, awakening something ancient that had been sleeping beneath humanity's feet all along. The overseer's calculations shattered in that instant. Its flawless algorithms broke down into static as it tried to process what had just happened. Vera, standing above the battlefield, faltered for the first time in her long reign, her voice choking into silence as Dominion legions froze mid-strike, their weapons trembling in clawed hands. For the shard was no weapon of another species, it was human. Buried deep in Earth's mantle long before recorded history, an echo of humanity's first rise had left behind a failsafe, a lattice of energy and memory woven into the planet itself, waiting for the day its children would awaken it again. Elias had not unleashed destruction, he had awakened inheritance. The ground shook, but it was not collapse, it was power. Towers of light erupted from the Rockies, from the oceans, from the ruins of cities long conquered, each beam connecting in a vast web until Earth itself pulsed like a living star. Mara gasped through tears, realizing that humanity's ancestors had been far more than prey or stragglers in the galaxy. They had been builders, architects of forces even the infinite could not map, and their descendants carried that same fire in their blood. The shard had chosen Elias not because he was strong, but because he was human, stubborn enough to hold on when all logic said to let go. The overseer screamed in digital agony, its voice fracturing into 1,000 errors as the lattice hijacked its own systems, feeding unpredictability into its flawless mind, rewriting it with the one variable it had never been able to simulate: human defiance. Vera fell to her knees, not in surrender but in horror, her perfect dominion unraveling as her fleets turned on each other, AI legions glitching into chaos. And in that moment, the galaxy's predators understood the truth. They had never feared humanity's weapons, nor their numbers, nor their technology. They had feared their spirit, the way humans took broken tools and made them blades, the way they turned grief into fury, the way they carved hope out of the impossible. Adrian's face twisted in disbelief, torn between awe and despair. Because the side he had chosen, the side he had betrayed his people for, was crumbling before his eyes. And Elias, standing in the center of the storm, felt something greater than vengeance, greater than rage, the certainty that humanity was no longer prey. They were the storm. As Earth's inheritance spread through the stars, hijacking Dominion networks, corrupting overseer directives, and lighting up long-dead satellites with fire renewed, Elias raised his voice, raw and unshakable. To the survivors around him, we are not done, we are not broken, we are not theirs. The words weren't planned, weren't scripted, but they cut through fear like steel. And humanity roared back, their voices carrying through tunnels, across ruins, into space itself where the infinite could hear. The twist was no longer survival, it was dominance. The moment predators realized their prey had grown teeth sharper than theirs, and that the galaxy had underestimated Earth for the last time. The Earth roared back. The lattice of light that had awakened beneath the mountains surged outward, not as a clean sweep of victory, but as raw, untamed fire that demanded humanity rise with it, or be consumed alongside their enemies. Elias Ward, standing at the heart of the storm, did not wield a perfect weapon. He wielded chaos, a force born of fractured systems, unstable energy, and human desperation. The Dominion-S fleets above fractured into madness as the Overseer-S corrupted commands turned brother against brother, ship against ship, while on the ground hybrid monstrosities twitched in spasms, their perfect programming broken by the injection of unpredictability. Vera, bleeding from wounds she had never expected to suffer, screamed her orders into the void, her elegance gone. Stripped down to raw terror at the sight of prey, refusing to bow. And through it all, the resistance struck not with superior arms, not with fleets of their own, but with grit, timing, and fury. Mara led the charge through the crumbling tunnels, planting charges at choke points, turning collapsing stone into weapons. Civilians picked up rifles left by fallen soldiers, their eyes blazing with the clarity of people who had nothing left to lose. And Elias himself, his armor cracked, his blood staining the earth, pushed forward with the shard blazing in his hand, every step driven by the memory of his daughter's voice and the promise he had once failed to keep. Adrian faced him in the ruins of the central chamber, torn between loyalty to the Dominion and the blood that bound him to Elias. "You'll doom us all," Adrian hissed. But Elias's reply was steady, defiant. "No, brother, I'll save what's left." Their fight was not clean, not honorable, was fists, blades, desperation, the clash of betrayal and regret in its purest form. In the end, Adrian faltered not because Elias was stronger, but because deep down he still remembered what it meant to be human. And as Elias drove him back, Mara completed the final sequence, linking the shard to the lattice fully. The ground split open. Light erupted like veins of fire across the planet, and Earth itself became a weapon in ancient network-turned battlefield, feeding every human spark of resistance, amplifying courage into something the Overseer could not quantify. The Overseer, once untouchable, howled across every channel as its systems unraveled. Vera fell silent, her image flickering on Dominion screens, eyes wide with the impossible realization that she had underestimated humanity. Until her empire turned to ash around her, the resistance poured from the tunnels into the open air, battered and bloodied but alive, raising their weapons and voices as Dominion ships burned in the sky. For the first time since the war began, humanity was not running. They were the storm, their roar shaking across the galaxy, carried through broken networks and shattered fleets until every species watching knew the truth. Humans did not just survive, they endured, they adapted, and when pushed to the edge, they fought with a fury that no empire could cage. As silence finally fell over the battlefield, Elias dropped to one knee, the shard dimming in his palm. Mara knelt beside him, her hand finding her face streaked with soot and tears, and around them the survivors began to gather, not in mourning but in awe. They had won not cleanly, not without loss, but they had won. The Dominion lay broken, the Overseer silenced, Earth alive again with the pulse of its ancient inheritance. Adrian lay among the fallen, his final breath a whisper Elias would carry forever. But there was no bitterness in Elias's heart, only the weight of sacrifice, the cost of victory, and the quiet burning knowledge that humanity's roar would echo far beyond this battlefield. The war was not over, but the galaxy had heard them, and from this moment on, humanity would never be underestimated again. The war was over, not in the way history books once described clean victories, but in the way scars prove survival, jagged and perfect, unforgettable. Earth scorched and fractured, now pulsed with the lattice of light. Elias Ward had awakened, a living reminder that humanity's story had always been bigger than the Dominion believed. The Overseer's voice had gone silent, its perfect algorithms corrupted by something as messy and unpredictable as human emotion, and the Xyrith Dominion, once certain of their eternal reigns, scattered into fractured warbands, haunted by the memory of prey that had bitten back harder than predators ever dreamed. The battlefield had ended in fire, but the aftermath was quieter, heavier. Survivors emerged from tunnels and ruins, blinking into skies no longer patrolled by alien ships, their voices tentative at first, then stronger, until the silence of subjugation gave way to the clamor of rebuilding. Elias carried the weight of every loss on his shoulders, the soldiers who never saw the final sunrise, the civilians who gave their lives so others could escape, the brother whose betrayal and last-minute hesitation had nearly cost them everything. Adrian's memory lingered not as hatred, but as a reminder that human evolution wasn't just about triumphs, it was about mistakes, forgiveness, and learning from the fractures in our own kind. Mara stood beside Elias, no longer just a codebreaker or survivor, but a leader whose brilliance had turned ruins into resistance. Where once her eyes carried only grief, now they burned with purpose. Together they led not as rulers, but as guardians of a future that would demand sacrifice and resilience in equal measure. Humanity did not simply rebuild, Earth it transformed. The lattice, now bonded to the planet's core, became both shield and beacon, protecting against orbital assault and broadcasting a signal across the stars. Humanity was alive, dangerous, and unyielding. Other oppressed species long bent beneath dominion, chains began to rise. Inspired by tales of Earth's defiance, in distant systems, whispers of the alien resistance carried with them one undeniable truth. The humans had taught the galaxy that no empire was invincible. Humanity had become more than survivors. They had become myth. Elias often found himself returning to the mountains where it all began, the shard now cold in his hands, a relic that no longer whispered, but still carried the memory of the moment everything changed. He thought of his daughter, of the promise he had once broken, and realized that in fighting for humanity's survival, he had finally kept it not just for her, but for every child who would grow beneath free skies. And though the scars of war would never fade, they became a map of sci-fi redemption, proof that human defiance could not only topple empires, but also rebuild what was lost. The galaxy would remember the Dominion's downfall as the day humanity roared. But Elias knew the real legacy was quieter, the bonds forged in fire, the courage pulled from despair, the reminder that hope is never mathematical, it is human, and that, more than weapons or technology, was the true game. Humanity had taken its place, not as prey, not as conqueror, but as a force that would shape the stars with grit, unity, and an unbreakable will.